My parents handed my younger brother the family business, the one I helped build from a storage unit in our backyard, and then called me the same afternoon to ask if I'd cover payroll that month. I said sure. I don't know why. Maybe because saying yes was the only language I'd ever spoken fluently in that house. But here's what they didn't count on. I kept every receipt, every contract, every wire transfer going back 6 years. And when my brother ran the business into the ground 8 months later, I didn't bail him out. I didn't even pick up the phone. I want to back up, though, because the story doesn't start with the business. It starts with a Wednesday afternoon in October, when I drove 40 minutes to my parents' house to help my dad organize his filing cabinet. He'd been putting it off for 2 years. The folders were a disaster: tax documents mixed with expired coupons, utility bills rubber-banded to birthday cards. I was the one who'd offered, because I'm the one who always offered. That was just the shape of things in our family. I was sitting cross-legged on the floor of his office, sorting through a stack of manila envelopes, when I found it. A thick folder, cream-colored, with the words operating agreement. Final printed on the tab in my dad's blocky handwriting. I opened it thinking it was something outdated, something from before the business even had a real legal structure. But the date at the top was from 3 months earlier, August. I'd been running the day-to-day operations in August. I remembered that month specifically because I'd spent most of it renegotiating our supplier contracts to bring costs down before the slow season hit. I read the first page, then the second. By the third, I understood what I was looking at. Ownership had been restructured. My brother, who had worked in the business for 14 months total, who still called me to ask how to process a refund, had been given 51%. My name was listed as a minority stakeholder at 22%. My parents split the rest. There was no note. No, we'll explain this later. Nothing. I set the folder down on the carpet. The room felt very still, the way rooms do when something has shifted and the walls don't know it yet. I could hear my dad in the kitchen, the clink of a mug, the low sound of a sports radio station he kept on as background noise. I sat there for probably 4 minutes before I stood up, placed the folder back where I'd found it, and finished organizing the rest of the cabinet. When my dad came in to check on me, I told him everything looked good. He said, "Thanks, Hon." I drove home with the radio off. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in bed and worked backward through the last 6 years. The 18-hour days at the start, when we were operating out of a rented storage unit and I was doing inventory counts at midnight because there was no one else. The year I put $23,000 of my own savings into equipment because the business loan hadn't come through yet and we had a contract we couldn't lose. The supplier trip to Atlanta, where I sat in 3 days of back-to-back meetings while my brother texted me asking which airport terminal to use for a flight he'd booked himself. The raise I'd never given myself because I kept reinvesting. The promotion I'd turned down at a marketing firm because I thought this was my future, our future, as a family. I thought about my mom telling me, maybe 2 years in, that I had a gift for this. She'd said it standing in the doorway of our storage unit, looking at the shelving system I'd built over a long weekend. A gift for this. Like I was a natural disaster that happened to be useful, I'd taken it as a compliment. It didn't occur to me until that sleepless Wednesday night that praise can be a leash. Thursday passed. Friday, nobody called. The following Monday, I was back in the office. Our actual office now, a real space we'd leased 18 months ago, which I had also coordinated, when my phone buzzed with a text from my mom. "Hey, payroll's due Friday. Can you push the transfers through like usual?" I stared at that text for a long time. Like usual. Like this was an administrative task. Like the operating agreement I'd found wasn't sitting in a filing cabinet 40 minutes away, with my brother's name on the majority line, and mine quietly diminished beneath it. I didn't respond. I set my phone face down and went back to the spreadsheet I was working on. That Friday night, we had dinner together. My family does this most weeks, rotating houses. It was at my parents' place, the same table we'd eaten at my whole life. Mismatched chairs, because the set had never quite matched even when it was new. My brother was already there when I arrived, which was unusual. He's typically late. He was sitting in my dad's usual chair, which was also unusual. Nobody mentioned it. The meal started like every other one. My mom had made her pot roast, which she makes for occasions she considers significant. I cataloged that detail quietly. My dad asked my brother about a vendor call I'd actually set up, and then briefed my brother on 10 minutes before, because our dad had started routing operational questions to him instead of me, even though my brother had been calling me for the answers anyway. I waited until we were between the main course and dessert. Then I said calmly that I'd found the operating agreement. My brother looked at his plate. My mom reached for her water glass. My dad was the one who spoke first. He said the restructure was about long-term planning, that my brother needed something to build toward, that I was doing great. I was always doing great. I didn't need the incentive the way he did. I didn't need the incentive. I sat with that sentence. The person who had built the thing from the floor up, who had never once needed to be convinced to show up, who had sacrificed a different career and years of her 30s and $23,000 in savings. She didn't need the incentive. The person who had called me 12 times in 1 week to ask questions I could answer in 30 seconds, who still didn't know the name of our primary freight carrier. He did. My mom said gently that my brother had had a harder time finding his footing, that this was their way of giving him something stable. She said I was the strong one. She said it like a compliment. I excused myself, went to the bathroom and stood at the sink with the water running, looking at my reflection for a moment before I dried my hands and walked out. I didn't go back to the table. I hugged my mom, said goodnight, and left. In the car, I opened my banking app and looked at the payroll transfer I still hadn't sent. It was still sitting there, pending, waiting on me. My finger hovered. I didn't cancel it that night. I went home and sat on the floor of my home office. Not for drama, just because I'd been standing all day and the floor was there. And I opened the bottom drawer of my desk, where I keep physical documents I actually need. Signed contracts. Receipt. Loan paperwork from years ago, with my signature on the personal guarantee. Not my brother's, not my parents'. Mine. I pulled out a folder and started going through it like I was studying for something, except I wasn't. I already knew what was in there. I just needed to hold it, I think. To remind myself that this was real, that I hadn't imagined 6 years of my life. At the back of the drawer was an envelope I'd kept from early on, maybe 4 years in. My mom had sent me a card on the anniversary of the business. Not a birthday, not a holiday. She'd actually written a card to mark the year. Inside, she'd written, "I don't know what we would have done without you stepping up the way you did. You have no idea how much your father and I see the sacrifices you've made. We're so proud." I read that card 3 times. The woman who wrote it, the one who saw the sacrifices, wasn't the same one who'd sat at the dinner table and told me the person who'd made those sacrifices didn't need the incentive. I turned the card over and wrote 2 words on the back. Not for anyone else. Just to see them outside of my own head. Done enabling. I didn't feel lighter. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt clear, which is a different thing entirely. I didn't cancel the payroll transfer that week. I did it the week after, on a Tuesday morning, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold while I was thinking. I moved the transfer amount into a separate account I'd opened the month prior. My own, no joint access, nothing linked to the business. Then I sent a short email to our accountant. Not dramatic, not accusatory, just informational. Going forward, payroll authorizations would need to come from the majority stakeholder. I CC'd my brother. I didn't get a response that morning. By afternoon, my phone had 6 missed calls. Mom, Dad, my brother, then Mom again, then a number I didn't recognize, then my brother again. I listened to 2 of the voicemails. My mom's voice was tight, like she was trying to stay calm and not quite succeeding. "Your brother can't access the payroll account. You need to call us back, sweetheart. This is urgent." The word sweetheart did something to me. Not in a soft way. I called the accountant instead, walked him through the authorization structure and made sure everything was documented properly. That took about 20 minutes. Afterward, I poured the cold coffee down the sink and made a fresh cup. 2 days later, I got a text from my brother. Short, no punctuation, the way he texts. "What are you doing?" Not a question, more like an accusation with no energy behind it. I didn't respond. That Saturday, I stopped by the office to pick up some files I needed. Original vendor contracts I'd negotiated and signed. Physical copies I wanted for my own records. When I pulled into the lot, I noticed my brother's car was there, which was surprising for a Saturday. He's historically not a Saturday person. The lights in the main office were on. I went in through the back. He was at my desk. Not the desk we'd set up for him in the smaller office when he joined, but mine, the one with the monitor I'd calibrated myself and the organizer system I'd built over a year of iteration. He had his feet up and he was on the phone, talking to someone in the easy, performative way he gets when he wants to sound authoritative. He said, "Just wrap it up with them. We're restructuring how we handle that account anyway." I didn't move. He saw me, blinked, took his feet off the desk slowly, said hold on to whoever was on the line. Then he looked at me and said, "Dad wants us to work this out." I said, "I came for the vendor contract. I'm not here to work anything out." He said, "You're being really dramatic about this." I picked up the folder I'd come for, checked that everything was in it, said, "Those are mine, by the way, the negotiation notes, the relationship, the contracts. I need you to not represent yourself as the contact on those accounts going forward." He laughed, the way someone laughs when they're nervous but don't want to show it. Said, "It's a family business. What's yours is ours." I looked at him for a second. Then I left. On the way home, I called my own attorney. I'd set up a consultation the week before, after the operating agreement. I'd wanted to understand my options before I made any moves. She'd been clear with me. As a minority stakeholder, I had limited leverage over day-to-day decisions, but I had rights to financial disclosure. I had a record of contribution that could be relevant in a dispute, and I had the ability to divest my stake if I chose to. She'd also pointed out that if I was the one who had been managing vendor relationships and I chose to stop, those relationships would likely go with me. I thought about that on the drive home. Those relationships had taken years. They weren't in a file. They were built on early morning calls and remembered details and the kind of trust that comes from showing up consistently. My brother had been on maybe 4 of those calls total. That evening, I drafted an email. Not to my family. To 3 of our top vendors. Not to poach anything. Not to undermine anything. Just to introduce myself formally as someone who might be moving into an independent consulting capacity and wanted to stay in touch. Professional, warm, factual. I'd been their point of contact for years. They wrote back within hours. One of them said, "Honestly, we've been wondering if you were planning something. We'd love to keep working with you, whatever the setup looks like." I didn't forward that email to anyone. I just saved it. The following week, I got a call from my dad. Not to my cell, to a number I hadn't heard ring in a long time, an old Google voice line I'd set up years ago for business and mostly forgotten about. He must have looked it up somewhere. When I saw the notification, I almost let it go, but something made me pick up. He sounded older than I'd expected. Not old, just quieter. He said my name. Asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. He said the business was having some trouble, that my brother was having a hard time with the vendor calls, that some orders had gotten mixed up, and a client had complained, and they weren't sure how I'd handled that kind of situation in the past. I said I'd kept notes on all of it, that the process documents were in the shared drive under a folder called Operations, SOPs. He could have my brother look there. My dad was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "We didn't mean for you to feel pushed out." I didn't say anything, he said. "Your mom thought it was what was best. She thought you'd understand." There it was. The same sentence, different mouth. I told him I understood everything just fine. And then I said, quietly but clearly, "I'm not coming back to fix this. If the business needs to restructure, that's between you, Mom, and the majority stakeholder you chose. My attorney has my contact information if there are formal matters to discuss." I hung up. Not abruptly. I said goodbye first. But I hung up. 3 days after that, I drove past the office. I wasn't planning to. I just cut through that block on the way back from an errand. The parking lot had 2 cars in it at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday, when it usually had 6 or 7. The sign on the front window, a small vinyl decal that I had designed and ordered in year 2, was still there, slightly peeling at one corner. I'd been meaning to replace it for months. I kept driving. My phone had been quieter than usual. A few more calls from my mom I'd let go to voicemail. A long text from my brother that I read once and didn't answer. A brief, formal email from my parents' accountant, not mine, asking me to confirm my stake percentage for a financial review. I forwarded it to my attorney with a single line. Please handle this on my behalf. About 3 weeks after I'd stopped the payroll transfer, I got a call from a number I recognized as a local business banking line. I almost didn't pick up, but I'd been expecting a call about a separate account I was closing, so I answered. It wasn't about my account. It was a banker I'd worked with for years on the business side. She said she was reaching out informally, that she wasn't sure if I knew, but the business checking account had been flagged for irregular activity. Apparently, someone, my brother, had tried to list himself as the sole authorized user and remove my name, but the paperwork had errors, and the change hadn't processed correctly. She wanted to let me know because my name was technically still on the account. I thanked her. Said I'd be in the following morning to formally remove myself from anything linked to that entity. I was there when they opened. 45 minutes. I walked out clean. That night I opened a new document on my laptop. I titled it, Record of Contribution. And I spent 2 hours doing something I should have done years ago, writing down everything I'd built, everything I'd funded, every process I'd created, every relationship I'd cultivated. Not for a lawsuit, not to show anyone. Just so it existed somewhere outside my own head, in black and white with dates attached. My brother texted me that week. 2 words. Really mature. I looked at it for a second, put my phone face down, went back to what I was doing. The hard part, harder than the business, harder than the money, was the Saturday I ran into a woman from my parents' neighborhood at the farmer's market. She'd known our family for years. She stopped me near the bread stand, touched my arm, and said, I heard about the changes over at your family's company. Your brother's doing such a good job stepping up. Your parents must be so proud. She smiled at me like she was sharing something warm. I smiled back, said, That's great. Picked up a loaf of sourdough I hadn't planned to buy. Walked to my car and sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes before I could make myself pull out. When I got home, I looked the business up online, something I hadn't done since I'd stepped away. There was a new post on their Instagram, the account I had set up, with the handle I had chosen, announcing new leadership and fresh direction. There was a photo of my brother at the front desk. The caption thanked the community for their support and talked about an exciting new chapter. 11 comments. 3 of them said some version of can't wait to see what you do next. Not a word about the 6 years that had built the thing he was standing in front of. I didn't comment. I unmuted the account for exactly long enough to read the post, then muted it again. Then I opened the email chain I had with one of our longest-standing vendors and wrote a short note saying I was officially moving forward with an independent structure and would love to schedule a call to discuss the future of our work together. He responded in 12 minutes. I was hoping you'd reach out. When are you free? The formal exit from the business took longer than I expected. There were meetings with attorneys, questions about valuation, a tense email thread between my lawyer and my parents' lawyer that I stayed out of almost entirely. I didn't fight for more than I was owed. I took my 22% stake value at fair market assessment, and I walked away with my name off everything. It was the cleanest I'd felt in 6 years. Some things take longer to settle. I still drive past that block sometimes, not on purpose, just habit, the geography of a city you've worked in long enough. The sign is still there, still peeling at the corner. The parking lot is usually quiet on weekdays now. I heard through someone tangential that they'd lost 2 of the vendor contracts I'd managed. I didn't confirm it. Didn't need to. About a month after everything was finalized, I got a card in the mail. My mom's handwriting on the envelope. Those careful loops I'd know anywhere. Inside. A single note card. She hadn't signed it. She'd just written. I think I confused steadiness with invincibility. I don't think I understood what I was asking you, Terry. No apology. No request to come back. Just that. I stood in my kitchen and read it twice. I placed it on the counter next to a receipt from the sourdough I'd bought the day I ran into the neighbor. I don't know why I'd kept it, I just had. And I looked at them both for a moment. 2 small pieces of paper, representing 2 different chapters. I put the card in the drawer with the original anniversary note she'd sent me years ago, the one where she said she saw what I'd sacrificed. Same handwriting. Different truth. Or maybe, And this is the part I've been sitting with. Maybe it was the same truth, finally said in the right direction. I'm not angry. I tried to be, at the beginning, because anger would have been simpler. But what I actually felt, and what I mostly still feel, is something closer to clarity. The kind that comes when you stop performing a role and realize the stage was never really yours to begin with. These days, I get up early. I work from my home office, mostly, and the business I've been quietly building has 3 vendor relationships that used to belong to my family's company, and several new ones I've built on my own. I don't talk about what I came from when I meet new clients. I just show up, do what I say I'm going to do, and let the work speak. I still know my parents' address. I still remember their birthdays. I haven't blocked anyone. But I've stopped being the person who picks up every call. Some things you give away for years, thinking you're being generous, only to realize you were being consumed. And the difference between those two things, generosity and consumption, is whether the other person ever stopped to ask if you had anything left. If you've been the one building something in silence while someone else prepared to put their name on it, I want you to know this. Your work exists, even when no one credits it. The relationships you built, the systems you created, the knowledge you accumulated, those go with you. They always did. They were never as tied to the institution as you feared. It took me a long time to understand that walking away from something you built isn't losing it. It's taking it back in the only form that was ever really yours. The ability, the knowledge, the proof that you could do it again. I will do it again. I already am.